Welcome to Debt Weapon. Today, we're diving into an explainer that completely shatters a very comfortable, very modern illusion. You know the image, the conscious Western consumer driving a pristine Tesla down a quiet, green street. It feels like progress, right? But the documentation we're examining today demands a pretty jarring cut to reality. Because while that engineering marvel glides down the road, there's a 10-year-old child in the Congo literally digging into the red earth with his bare hands to extract the cobalt powering that exact battery. We're constantly told that the crushing poverty in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC, is just the result of a tragic history of instability. But you really have to ask yourself, is this poverty an accident or is it a calculated, deliberate outcome? Well, the analysis we're unpacking today points to a chilling alternative. It suggests an entire nation is purposefully kept in a state of perpetual economic enslavement for one main reason: to keep your electric car affordable. Section 1. The $24 trillion paradox. Look, the modern world and the technology you and I use every single day simply would not exist without Africa. Specifically, the DRC. We are talking about an absolutely staggering scale of wealth, just sitting there, buried right beneath the dirt.
70%. That's the number. The DRC produces over 70% of the global supply of cobalt. And this isn't just about electric vehicles. Cobalt is the absolute critical, non-negotiable ingredient for your smartphone, your laptop, and all those massive green energy grids being built across the West. If this single country stopped producing, global technology would literally collapse overnight.
So, let's put this into perspective and look at the paradox. Saudi Arabia sits on an estimated $2.5 trillion in untapped resources, and we've all seen how that wealth built gleaming, futuristic mega-cities right out of the desert. Now look at the DRC. They're sitting on an estimated $24 trillion in untapped raw minerals: gold, copper, oil, and lithium. That is nearly 10 times the resource wealth of Saudi Arabia. But what does all that wealth actually translate to for the people living there? Well, Saudi citizens have an average annual income of around $54,000. In the DRC, despite sitting on a $24 trillion gold mine, the average person survives on just $1.50 a day. You have to wonder, how is it economically possible for the most resource-rich country on Earth to be one of the absolute poorest? According to the research, the answer lies in something called the colonial shape trap. You see the old era of flags and muskets? That ended. But the West still desperately needed resources, and the global financial systems outright refused to pay a fair market rate. The source material argues that a completely new systemic strategy was engineered. The goal was simple: keep plundering the wealth, but do it under the highly sophisticated, totally legal guise of international finance. Section 2. Debt as a weapon. To really understand this trap, the document suggests we need to investigate the underlying geopolitical architecture that enforces all this poverty. And the whole thing starts back in 1944 with the creation of institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank.
The source material notes that once Europe was rebuilt after the war, these massive financial institutions were essentially repurposed. They became a mechanism to drain resources and secure cheap labor from the developing world. As the quote goes, "They don't use guns anymore, they use debt as a weapon." It's essentially modern recolonization, hidden deep within the fine print of global loan agreements.
The documentation actually outlines a very sinister four-step framework designed to quietly seize control of a nation's economy. Step 1. You offer a newly independent country a massive infrastructure loan, but you attach cripplingly high interest rates to it. Step 2. When they inevitably miss a payment, you demand mandatory structural reforms. Step 3. You force the privatization of their state assets, allowing Western corporations to buy up highly lucrative mines for pennies on the dollar. And step 4, you force them to slash local spending on things like healthcare and raise taxes just so they can barely service the interest on that original loan. And the crushing result of all this? $42 billion. That is the staggering amount of debt currently bearing the country. The nation's wealth is systematically siphoned off by foreign corporations. Meanwhile, its people are left working in the dirt, generation after generation, paying off an economic trap they never asked for. Section 3. The assassination of sovereignty. Now, you might be wondering, why doesn't a leader just stand up, say no, and stop this entirely? Well, according to the text we're examining, whenever a leader in the developing world actually tries to break this debt trap, the Western response is incredibly swift and surgically precise.
Just look at the timeline. Back in 1960, the Congo elected Patrice Lumumba. His main platform? He planned to nationalize the country's mines and keep that $24 trillion of wealth for the Congolese people. Well, exactly 6 months later, Lumumba was assassinated, with documented assistance from US and Belgian elements. And in his place, they propped up a compliant dictator, General Mobutu.
Now, Mobutu committed massive, horrific human rights violations. But the source documents argue these actions were pretty much entirely ignored by the West, and the reason why is dark. He delivered on their 3 true demands. He guaranteed those IMF interest payments. He ensured an endless flow of cheap resources, and he maintained absolute geopolitical control in the region. The actual welfare of the Congolese people, that simply wasn't on the balance sheet.
The financial destruction under Mobutu is what ultimately sealed the nation's fate. National debt absolutely exploded, skyrocketing from 5% to a crippling 150% of their GDP. Under the weight of this frankly impossible math, the IMF was able to force the privatization of almost every single profitable business in the DRC. Their sovereign wealth was legally and systematically stripped away.
Section 4. The Green Lie. This brings us back to your driveway. Because the modern green revolution, with all its shiny promises of clean energy, is not some noble break from this dark colonial past. The data indicates it is built directly on top of it. We all desperately want to feel green, but it turns out we completely refuse to pay the real price for it.
So, prepare yourself for the ultimate economic twist here. If the global supply chain didn't rely on exploited labor, the math changes entirely. If the DRC were actually paid a fair, open market rate for its cobalt, a Tesla that currently costs $40,000 would actually cost $400,000. The entire green revolution is only commercially viable because a developing nation is being forced to absorb the true cost.
But the source material points out something crucial. This isn't just an isolated incident happening thousands of miles away. These systemic rockets are absolutely everywhere. The exact same overarching financial architecture operates domestically, right under our noses. The research links this to things like the Mars family monopolizing the cheap pet food that makes animals sick, while simultaneously owning the veterinary clinics that treat them. It's the exact same financial logic responsible for the $4.5 trillion we lose to health insurance administrative waste.
At this point, the analysis really turns the mirror on all of us. It suggests that the ultimate goal of these hidden power structures is total financial and psychological control. Whether they're stripping a foreign nation of its minerals or draining your personal bank account through corporate monopolies, the system demands that you remain a docile cog, just quietly trading your finite life for a paycheck, which is then heavily taxed, while the illusion of a better, greener world is sold right back to you.
The overarching takeaway from these documents is chilling, because it shows us that the system doesn't have a glitch. It is working exactly as it was designed to. It actually needs Africa to remain poor so that our clean energy can stay cheap. So the next time you see a commercial promising to save the planet with a brand new electric battery, you really have to ask yourself, whose life is subsidizing that price tag? And when are we finally going to demand a system that doesn't require an entire country to lose its soul just to power our illusions?